Hi, I'm Mike Dunbar. This is a piece of curly maple. It's the backboard for a candle holder. I'm hand planing it because the hand plane is the right tool for the job. No machine, no sandpaper is going to give me a finish as smooth as will this hand plane. You know, if I was stranded on a desert island and I could only have one type of tool, the tool I would take would be my hand planes because they're the most versatile tools in my shop. I have hand planes that do all sorts of things. This plane will make rabbets. This one raises the panels and raised panel doors. This one makes moldings. In addition to smoothing and shaping, let me show you something else over here. This is the joint and square shooting board. It's used for jointing and squaring the ends of small pieces of wood. The shooting board consists of three pieces: the bottom board, the ramp, and the stop. The bottom board has a dust groove in it so that shavings won't gather under the plane and push it out a square. The ramp is sloped to distribute the cutting action over the entire width of the blade. The stop holds the work at a right angle to the plane. I'm going to use the shooting board and this plane to trim the end of this piece of cherry. Most people would use a disc sander for this, but I think the plane is more precise. Now I'm going to show you how to make a plane work this well. The first step in making a plane work well is to begin with quality. You wouldn't buy the cheapest table saw you could find. You'd know you weren't getting good quality. The same applies to planes. This plane has plastic parts. The metal parts are poorly fitted and they're poorly finished. If you're going to buy a new plane, buy it from a woodworking supply house, not from the local hardware store. The other thing you do is what I often do, and that is buy old planes. You can get them at flea markets. You might even have one sitting out in the garage. This is an old Stanley No. 4, probably made during the 1920s. Stanley made these by the hundreds of thousands, so they're inexpensive and they're very common. You're going to see that it's not a lot of work to get a plane from this condition to this condition, a tool that will plane curly maple. Before we begin working on this plane, let's take a look at its anatomy. This is the lever cap, the cap iron, the blade or cutter, the cap iron screw. These are the frog screws. This is the frog. This is the lateral adjustment lever, the longitudinal adjustment wheel. This is the plane body. This is the frog adjustment screw. First we'll take off the lever cap. That allows us to remove the plane blade and the chip breaker. The two are held together by this screw. This is the frog. Obviously there's a lot of rust buildup down here. We're going to have to clean that up. These two screws hold the frog in place. When I loosen them, we'll be able to take the frog out of the plane. Well, that's just what you'd expect to find. A lot of old shavings under the frog. Now that I've got the plane disassembled, let's clean it up. A tub of mineral spirits, which is just paint thinner, takes off an awful lot of the grime. Rust will come off with some coarse steel wool, number 3. If there's any grime that doesn't come off in the mineral spirits, don't be afraid to let it sit a little longer. This is the lateral adjustment lever. I'm finding that it's quite stiff. I can work some mineral spirits in there to help loosen it up, and I'll loosen it up further with oil later on. Now, on the other side of the frog is the longitudinal adjustment wheel. It's on a left-hand thread, so I turn it clockwise to back it off the stud. I can remove it completely, which allows me to clean it and the Y yoke. Okay, we're going to dry this off now, set it aside. The next step will be to flatten the sole. You know, it would make sense that a tool that's supposed to produce a flat surface would have to have a flat sole itself. However, that sole is anything but flat. The shiny areas are high. The dark area is low. That's the result of wear. However, don't make the mistake of thinking that a new plane is perfectly flat. I sprayed the sole of this plane with a red layout fluid and then ran it over the lapping table. The sole of a new plane is very seldom perfectly flat. To flatten, you need a flat surface. Some woodworkers use the top of their table saw, but I like a dedicated surface. I use a piece of 3/8" tempered plate glass. To it, I glue a sanding belt with spray adhesive. Let me show you how I use it. Notice that I'm maintaining even pressure. What I'm not doing is duplicating the action of hand planing. I'm trying to eliminate the wear that that action has created. You notice I put the frog back in the plane to create the same stresses as when the plane is in use. Now we've got a little bit further to go. There are no shortcuts. There, I'm done on the lapping table. You notice there's a slight hollow here. Not concerned about that. The plane does make contact all around the edges of its sole, and above all, right here along the edge of the mouth. I also lapped 3 other areas. The front edge of the lever cap, the front edge of the chip breaker. That way, it makes tight contact with the back of the cutter, and shavings can't get jammed in between them. Notice, too, that I flattened the back of the cutter. This is the first step in sharpening, and it's unfortunately one that too many woodworkers overlook. I don't have time to give you a complete tutorial in sharpening, but I can't stress enough that you must begin by flattening the back of the cutter. It's very similar to flattening the sole of the plane. Let me show you how it's done. Be sure to maintain even pressure. Above all, never lift the back of the cutter. The purpose of this is to not only flatten the back of the blade, but also to remove any imperfections. Remember, a cutting edge is 2 flat, polished surfaces coming together at an angle. This is the first of those surfaces. The second is going to be produced on the grindstone. Don't try to grind too fast or to use too much pressure, because you'll overheat the blade. Quench the blade periodically in cool water. If you overheat the blade, it'll lose its hardness and it won't hold an edge. For the gentle crested curve of a smooth plane blade, you can grind both the profile and the bevel at the same time by rocking the blade as I'm doing here. I don't place the blade flat on the rest. I get more flexibility by using the rest as a contact point. Grinding is a matter of practice. I've ground hundreds of plane blades, so I can do it freehand. But if you're not comfortable, spray some layout fluid on the back of the plane blade and trace the profile you want and grind to that line. Grind the bevel to about 35 degrees. The important word here is about. You don't have to get crazy about it. This is a good uniform bevel. Remember, a sharp edge is a result of 2 flat, polished surfaces coming together at an angle. Before I ground the bevel, I flattened the back of this cutter on the lapping table. Now I'm polishing it. The degree of polish that's necessary is a mirror finish. I started on 330 grit wet and dry sandpaper on the lapping table. I'm now using a medium grade ceramic stone, and I'll finish here on the white fine ceramic stone. Until I'm done with this process, I can't even begin to talk about honing the bevel. There, I like what I see. Now I'm going to hone the bevel. I'm going to create a fine line of polish along the entire cutting edge. I'll do that by holding the cutter at the same angle as the bevel. I'll polish by moving the cutter in small circles and rocking along the slightly crested edge. That's it. It doesn't take much. You don't want to hone so much that you remove the hollow created by the grindstone. Let's reassemble the plane. Before we assemble the plane, I want to show you an adjustment that we won't be able to see later on. It's the frog adjustment. It moves the frog forward and back. It's important because it regulates the size of the mouth. It's done with this screw down here underneath the longitudinal adjustment knob. Now as I turn this screw counterclockwise, look down here in the mouth and you'll see the frog being backed off. Now that the frog is backed off, we need to assemble the chip breaker and the blade. This is the way to do it to avoid any damage to the cutting edge. Set the chip breaker back about 1/16 of an inch. That gives the cutting edge plenty of support so it won't chatter. The assembly fits on the frog. With the chip breaker and cutter in the plane, you can see the lateral adjustment. The longitudinal adjustment, the movement of the blade back and forth, is done with this knob here. I'm going to adjust the knob until I can feel the cutting edge resting on my fingertip. Now I'll put on the lever cap. It fits over the lever cap screw and push down the cam. Now I can make the final frog adjustment. The distance between the cutting edge and the front of the mouth should be no wider than the shaving that has to pass through it. Since this is a smooth plane used for very fine work, that's going to be a very narrow opening. Now I can tighten the frog screws. They should be snug, but not so tight that you risk breaking the cast iron frog. Now we can make the final adjustments. A lot of woodworkers do it visually by sighting down the saw, but I prefer to do it by feel with my fingertips. I can tell whether the cutter is high on one side or the other. I can also tell whether or not it's set deeply enough. There, that's just about right. Let's see how it works. There, that works as well as the plane we began with. You know, I've been working wood for 20 years. Using a well-tuned hand plane is still the most satisfying experience.